Okay, hi. What we're going to do today is, if you recall, this is tough when it's a whole month since we've last met, but if you can recall from last month, we just talked about building our faith with the toolbox. You remember the toolbox and the different things that can help us to build our faith, and it'd be prayer and the church and the sacraments and the Bible. And what we're going to do in our times together is we're going to kind of go a little deeper into each of those. So what my kind of goal is, I hope it's accomplished by the end of our time together, is that I have given you not only the tools, well, the church gave the tools, but I've given you the tools and how to use them. Because that's the problem, I think, we as church, is we pass out the tools and then just say, figure it out for yourself. So what I'm trying to do is provide you the tools to build your life of faith. Now, if you look at confirmation as graduation, and after confirmation, you close the toolbox and you never again open it up, then that's on you. At that point, it's on you. I've done everything I can. I really believe that if you build your life of faith throughout your life, that will strengthen you and will particularly help you as you go through the good times and the bad times in life, and we have them both. So that's what I'm hoping to accomplish this year as you make your get confirmed and you make that commitment in the faith, is that you don't just go through a ceremony that's absolutely not where your heart is. But you're kind of going through this ceremony, confirmation, in order to give you the gift of God's Spirit and to give you the ability to use those tools. So what we're going to do today, since it is a special feast day in the church, is I want to talk about the saints. When you think of saints, most of the time you might think of St. Peter. St. Peter was one of the apostles of Jesus and was the one that kind of Jesus tapped as the head coach of the team of faith. So, so a lot of times you think of St. Peter, or you might think of St. Paul. St. Paul was, at first, was a persecutor of Christians. He was against Christians, and he was kind of the one trying to get them out of the scene. But no, what happened is he had a revelation from God, and he became then one of the strongest defenders of the faith. He brought the faith beyond just the area of where Jesus was in Jerusalem and that area, and brought it to different parts of the world. Most of the saints in the early days of the church, were what we call martyrs. What a martyr is someone who gives their life in love for Christ and in love for the church. Because in the early church, the first kind of 300 years, it was outlawed to be a Christian. See, this doesn't even make sense to you guys because you live in a free society. But in the first 300 years of the church, everyone was trying to get rid of the church and these crazy people that we call followers of Christ, this new way. And so if you really stood up and said, I don't care what society says, I'm going to be a follower of Christ, you got killed. You got killed. Not just made fun of, not just kind of maybe cast aside, as perhaps you might have to face today, but you were killed for the faith. So the early saints, like Saint Cecilia, anyone who was a musician, this is a great saint to remember, because each saint generally has a little story behind it that makes them the patron saint of certain activities. Saint Cecilia is the patron saint of music. She lived in the year 176. She was willing to die rather than to sacrifice to the pagan gods. So they said, you sacrifice to these pagan gods. And she said, I won't, because I believe in Jesus. Had her head chopped off. St. Perpetua was in 2003. She died at the age of 22 in one of the sporting events, part of a birthday celebration for the Roman emperor. It was fed to the lions. That's how they celebrated birthdays. Saint Sebastian, who is a patron saint of sports, is an athlete who was persecuted, and he was killed for his outspoken defense of his faith. But even when Christianity became legal in the 4th century, many continue to this day, and this is again something we don't really appreciate as Americans. People to this day are being killed for the faith, are still martyrs. Listen to this. It's estimated that 11 Christians are killed each day in the world because of their belief in Christ. Now, that happens frequently in places like North Korea, Iraq, Afghanistan, where Christianity still is not permitted to exist in some sections of those countries. As a matter of fact, there is an organization called Nazarene.org, okay, whose work is to support persecuted Christians. Their symbol, and I was given by someone who works in that organization. Their symbol is an Arabic letter for N. And they explained it to me, why is this symbol? So this is an organization that's working with people who are persecuted for their faith in these countries. And why do they use that symbol N? Well, this symbol is a symbol, it's the first letter N. Nazarene is a word for meaning Christian. What they would do is they will paint that symbol on your door of your house. And that was kind of a code to people. They're one of them. And oftentimes bad things were done to this day. And so the Nazarene, this organization, try to support people who are want to live their faith in persecuted areas. But you don't have to die for your faith. You don't have to die for your faith to be a saint. You just have to live your faith to be a saint. Here's a couple of examples that I just pulled from 10,000 saints that are officially saints in the church. St. Francis of Assisi, he lived in the 13th century, and he was a rich kid and had a very wealthy family. He wanted more than anything else. He aspired to grow up to be a soldier and then a prince. Yeah, he was rich. So he wanted to be a soldier and he wanted to be a prince. But then suddenly his heart was turned in faith. And his heart being turned in faith, he gave up all of his riches and he left his family and he devoted himself to serving the poor and also lepers and people who were like outcasts of society. He gathered in a small town of Assisi in Italy. He gathered a group of men together and he founded what we call a religious order. A religious order is a religious organization, could be men or women, and they have a certain purpose. So there'll be priests and there'll be brothers and there'll be lay people, but they have a certain calling. And the Franciscans is the order that St. Francis started. Makes sense, huh? His name's Francis, the Franciscans. Some Franciscans today, St. Clare was the first female Franciscan, and she lived at the time of St. Francis. and she started an order of religious women, the Franciscans. Neither were killed for their faith. So that's the point I'm trying to make. You don't have to be killed in order to be a saint. They just lived lives that they devoted themselves to the Lord. So Franciscans today, Saint Anthony, that our church is named after here, he was a Franciscan, and excuse me, he was named as a Franciscan priest, and he was actually Portuguese, grew up in the Lisbon area, but then he got a calling to go serve the order with St. Francis. He was a contemporary of St. Francis, and he lived among him, and he was a real smart guy. So Francis, when he was starting his order of priests and brothers, he decided to use Anthony kind of as the teacher of them. But he also had very bad health, and so he didn't return to Portugal, but he stayed in Italy in a small town called Padua, which is in northern Italy. So St. Anthony of Padua was a Franciscan as well. Cardinal Sean, I was talking about at Mass, he was my boss. I was his personal secretary when he was here in Fall River Diocese. He noticed, if you've ever seen him or met him or saw him on TV, he wears that brown habit. That's the habit of a Franciscan. So he's a modern day Franciscan. And then we have Pope Francis, who took the name Francis because of his closeness to St. Francis of Assisi. That's not his name. His name is Jorge. All right? But he took the name Francis because it's tradition in the church that when a pope is elected, he takes on a new name. And that's kind of part of something we're going to be talking about at the end of this session, your confirmation name. It's just kind of a symbol that you're beginning a new step or moment in your life. So Pope Francis took that name Francis after St. Francis of Assisi. Each of our churches in Falmouth are named after saints. St. Anthony of Padua we talked about. Then we have St. Patrick downtown. St. Patrick was in the 5th century, and he was credited with bringing the Catholic faith to the people of Ireland. His story's kind of neat because everyone thinks Patrick was Irish. He wasn't Irish. What happened was I forget how old he was, but he was a British citizen. But what happened was that he was kidnapped when he was 16. That was it. When he was 16 years old, Patrick, a British citizen, was kidnapped, and he was kidnapped by Irish raiders. And they held him in captivity for 6 years in what is now Ireland. He then escaped after 6 years with being held captive by the Irish. He escaped, and he went back to Britain, only to follow the calling to be a priest, and he was ordained a priest. And what he did was he requested if he could go back to Ireland to serve the people of Ireland. Think about that for a minute. The people who made him a captive, who captured him, he wanted to go back and serve them, this time bringing them the faith. And then he was eventually ordained a bishop for the people of Ireland. Then Elizabeth Seton, parish up in the north of Falmouth, she was the first American saint. She lived in the 1700s. She wasn't even Catholic when she grew up. When she was your age, she wasn't Catholic. But only she converted, and then she married, and she had 5 kids. And then when her husband died, she started a school for girls and devoted the rest of her life to serving Christ and serving the church in this particular row. And then down by the water, we have St. Thomas. The chapel at the Heights is named after one of the 12 apostles. We're told from the Gospel, and that's why they have this picture that looks kind of gross, that he's putting his finger in the side of Jesus. But what happened was when Jesus rose from the dead, he came back, and the first people he came back to were his followers, his apostles. But what happened was Thomas, he was absent. I don't know where he was. So he didn't see it. And everyone is saying, his friends, hey, Jesus is alive. He came back. And Thomas says, nah, I'm not going to believe that. I won't believe it until I put my hand in his side and see the wounds of his crucifixion. So that's depicted in this painting. And then we have St. Joseph. That's the church. We have the church down in Woods Hole. And that's named, obviously, after the husband of Mary, the foster father of Jesus. But saints are not only people who lived in the past. People are not just saints, are not just people who lived in the past. They were people who lived during our own lifetime. For me, these are bad pictures of it, but they're pictures of pictures. I've met 2 saints in my life. I've shook their hands. I've talked with them. And the 2 saints that I've met is St. Teresa of Calcutta, Mother Teresa. I met her in New Bedford. She came to New Bedford in 1995. And I met her and actually spent a couple of days working with her. That was at the time I was working with Bishop Sean. So Bishop Sean invited her to the United States, to New Bedford, to our diocese. And because I was working closely with Bishop Sean, I had to facilitate the masses and the ceremonies and the meetings that occurred between Mother Teresa and the bishop and different groups that were part of that 2 days there. So I met her in 95, and this is Pope John Paul II. Pope John Paul II was Pope for 27 years until 2005, I think. He died, I think, in 2005. He was Polish. Most of the time, popes for many centuries were Italian. He was nominated or was elected as a pope, and he was Polish, and that was kind of wild to think of. But he grew up during, you got to think about this, he grew up during the Nazi invasions of World War II. He was a strong defender of rights and dignity of human people because he saw a lot of injustice, and he saw a lot of horrible things. He was a brilliant scholar. He was an actor when he was in college. It says, and I don't know if your history books say this, God knows what your history books say today, but he is credited with, among other things, the collapse of the communist Russia. He had a lot to do with the collapse of communism in the 80s. And look that up. So he was a very powerful figure. So these are the 2, saints that I've met. So the chance of meeting a saint is very possible. One thing that I'm most impressed about John Paul II, and I met him in that capacity. That picture was when I was with Cardinal Sean, but I was a student over in Rome, so that's why I got to meet him a lot of times. This picture, well, let me get to that in a minute. This is, of course, Mother Teresa, okay? Mother Teresa worked with the poor, as you know, in India. She was known for her strong love for the poor. going into the city, gathering them, poor people who were dying by the side of the road. So she was quite an inspiration to all of us. She was a strong defender against abortion and equally devoted for caring for babies. She would tell mothers, if you're going to abort the baby, have the baby and I'll take it, and I'll take care of it. And she did that to hundreds of people, rather than looking at life for whatever reason that life was conceived and throwing it away. She says, no, life, everyone, no matter how they come into this world, she would say, no matter how they come into this world, that's a human life. And so you don't destroy that life. She was very strong about that. But she didn't just say, don't have abortions. She said, have the child and I'll take it. And she would take it into orphanages. So John Paul II, as I mentioned, was Pope for 27 years. But the thing I remember most about him, or the thing that impressed me more, and this is a picture of it. This man is named Ali Agca, A-G-C-A, okay? This man, this picture was taken in 1982. He first met him in 1981 in St. Peter's Square when Ali Agca shot the Pope 5 times. He didn't meet him personally at that time, but that's when they first encountered each other. It was on May 13th, 1981. I was a student at the time, and I was going down to the big ceremony. The Pope would have a weekly gathering of people out in the big square, St. Peter's Square. And he was coming in, and he was driving. He like would be in a little like Jeep, and wave at the people, and he's waving and he's waving. And Ali Agca is like where Mr. Adams is right now to me, and he shot him. I was at the college where I went, and I was about maybe half a mile away, and I was, as usual at that time, I was running late because I had tickets to it. And I was walking down towards the square as hundreds of people are running in the opposite direction. So I wasn't in the square at the time, but I was supposed to be. So, you know, that has a particular message for me, because a year after, the man who, he came close to death, John Paul, very close to death. He went to prison, and John Paul went to greet him and talk to him in prison. I couldn't do that. It's all I can do to talk to someone if I hear they're talking bad about me. He shot him. So John Paul II, for me, was really an inspiration, because he lived the gospel about forgiveness. We hear about Jesus says, forgive others. He did it. But what I want to do now, just to kind of conclude this, and then we're going to, I think, break up into groups for a few minutes, is I want to introduce you to 5 young people who are saints. Because again, we think saints lived years ago, and we think saints are old people like me. No. Here's 5. This one is Maria Goretti. Now, Maria Goretti lived in the 1800s, and she was one of the youngest people to become a saint. At the age of 12, younger than you guys, she was attacked by a neighbor who tried to rape her. And she resisted. She's saying, no, we can't do this. I can't have this happen to me. This is a sin. That's what she said. God doesn't want it. The man began to choke her and stabbed her 11 times. She died the next day. Devotion to this saint arose almost immediately. The young people were asking her intercession. What we mean by intercession And this has happened to some of you that I've known personally. You might say, Drew, for example, you might say, oh, I got a big test this week. Say a prayer for me. That sounds all right to do, right? You might see me at Mass and say, hey, say a prayer for me. Now, I could turn around and say, well, pray yourself. Why do you ask me to say a prayer for you? Well, you feel that maybe we all kind of storm heaven. We offer a prayer for someone else. You pray for a grandparent. I've watched or I've read some of your responses for the Meet You at the Altar. And you're doing a great job, many of you. Make sure you're doing that even today. That's part of the whole thing. It takes all of 5 minutes to do. And I'm reading them. I'm reading all in 9th grade, that's for sure. So some of you are doing it, some of you aren't, but start doing it, okay? And in it, you know, some people will say, you know, I'm praying for my grandmother who is sick right now. Well, that's normal to pray for someone, to offer them to God. So when we ask for the saints to pray for us, I kind of feel that's kind of someone with an inside track. They're saints. And so that's what's called intercession. So when I have a particular thing going on at St. Elizabeth Seton Parish, say there's a problem going on there. When I go to prayer, I ask for St. Elizabeth to hear my prayer, to kind of put in a good word for me, please. So there's nothing wrong with that. That's what we do as Catholics. It's part of what being Catholic is about. And so Maria Goretti has become kind of a patron saint of young people who want to live moral lives. And if you're not there now, you will be tempted going forward. And sometimes you know you're walking into a situation that you shouldn't be doing, you don't want to do, but you do want to do, if you know what I mean. Or you have a pressure of a boyfriend or a girlfriend to kind of go to that next level. And you really deep inside say, I don't want to do this, or I know this is not right. Ask for Maria Goretti's help. Have her pray for you, for your intentions. I firmly believe the power of prayer, and I firmly believe in the power of the intercession of the saints. Okay? The man, listen to the rest of this story, though, on Maria Goretti. The man was arrested. He did time, because she died. She was killed. The man was arrested. He did time. And when he was released from prison, the first thing he did was go to Maria's mother to ask for her forgiveness. But listen to this. When finally she was canonized, and that's the ceremony that officially recognizes as a saint, that happened in 1950, he was there at the Mass. So he had a total change of heart, obviously. He recognized how wrong he had done. He asked for the mother's forgiveness. And he was there to celebrate what he had caused, but led to her recognition as a saint. Francisco and Jacinta Mato, two more saints. They were two of the three little children that saw the apparition or the vision of Mary in the town of Fatima. If you were at Mass today, the big painting behind the altar, that's depicted of two of those children. All right, both were just around 10 years old, and they were so intense on that vision, and many people, if you read the story, or there's a movie out now called Fatima. It's a great movie, it really is. But people wanted them to say, no, this isn't true. You're not seeing a vision. You're causing problems. And they just held firm in their faith and said, we saw the Virgin Mary. And that caused a lot of problems for them, for their parents, but then eventually many people came to see that they were telling the truth. They weren't making up stories. Within a few years of the apparition, listen to this, and I think it's interesting when we think of our times today. They both died. One died at 10, and I think one died at 8. They both died of the pandemic of 1918. So it's kind of interesting. So I've been praying, asking for their intercession whenever I find out that someone is sick or someone is dying during this time. Now, there's two other people, and I think we're going to, because you're sick of listening to me, Jonathan found a video. There's two other people I'd like to introduce you to. One is called Chiara Badano, who was born in 1971 and died in 1990. And the other one is Carlo Acutis, who was born in 1991 and died in 2006. They haven't been made saints yet, but they're on the step before, because there's a whole step process in the Catholic Church to officially declare someone saints. Listen to the stories of these two people. A very brief video. So I just wanted to show you that because if anything you get from today's session is recognizing that the saints are not just people, old people a long time ago, but the saints can be you, can be me. And why can it be you? And why can't it be me? Because the same tools that they built their faith on, the exact same toolbox that we had out here a month ago, that we're trying to share with you. The tools of prayer, the tools of church, belonging to church and participating in church, not just putting in time, but actually participating and entering into it. The tools of the sacraments, receiving communion, going to confession. These are the exact same tools. These saints didn't just fly from heaven and pop down, but they were kids like you that used their gifts and talents to build up their faith. Okay? So this is what I'd like. Can you kill that and go? All right. This is what we're going to do. We're going to break up into groups for a while. A new rule from last time, because I got some bad looks from some of your parents. When you break up into a group, try to keep the 6 feet apart. Okay? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different adults. This is only going to be for 10 minutes. So if you're not with your best friend, things will be fine. And I just want you to answer that. What are some of the challenges you might face in order to follow the path of holiness, of being a saint today? Today. I know that's hard to even imagine. Me, a saint? Why not? Okay? So if the adults want to, and just bring your chair. Yes? Just so we can call it a night or a day. Feels like night already. You want to get the lights, please? So there's 3 things that I'm going to have the mentors give you as they leave. As they leave, I guess one. Do they have them already? I have one. Okay. These little cards are called holy cards. And a lot of times, I've done this before, and I'll give a holy card to the kids at St. Anthony's and a holy card of St. Elizabeth to the kids at St. Elizabeth, and I'll give a holy card to to St. Patrick. So that's a good way of doing it. And we found these other holy cards. These are the 2 youngest that we were talking about. Blessed Chiara and Blessed Carlo. And so I just want to give them to you because I think it's something maybe keep in a book or keep near your dresser, and there's a prayer on one. There's a prayer on one, and the other one, I think Carlo has, these are some of the quotes that are attributed to that young man, the gamer. The more we receive the Eucharist, that's you, receiving communion, the more we will become like Jesus, so that on this earth we will have a foretaste of heaven. That's what I said today at Mass. The only thing we have to ask God for in prayer is the desire to be holy. To always be close to Jesus, that's my life plan. Okay? So I'll give those to you.
Father, can I add something to that?
Sure.
The Eucharist? There was one thing I heard about the Eucharist this weekend, as a matter of fact, within the last week. When you receive the Eucharist, you don't consume the Eucharist consumes you.
Yeah, that's a great way of doing it. Because we're not just we're becoming what we eat. That's what we believe the Eucharist. The Eucharist is the body of Christ. We receive that so we can become the body of Christ. The final thing I want to give you, take a look at it. It's this white paper. This white paper is, you have to come up with a name of a saint for your confirmation. Very simple. Think about it. There's different ways you can do that. You can Google saints. You can Google interests. What are some things I'm interested in? What is the patron saint of sports? What's the patron saint of the internet? Carlo's the patron saint of the internet, by the way. And I want you to think about what saint. Don't just come up with I'm just going to put it whatever I want down. It has to be the name of a saint. It could be your regular name. It could be Andrew. Andrew was a saint, but some of you weren't named after saints. And the simple thing you have to do, 2-3 paragraphs. We're not talking about just I want to know. You can copy it from Google if you want, because that's what most of you do anyhow. And just so you can learn a little bit about the saint you choose. So you don't have to come up with this. Just I chose Saint Francis because, or I chose Saint Stephen because. And you just tell a little bit so that you know the saint that you chose. Get these back as soon as you can, but I gave a due date of January 3rd, which is probably a big mistake. I probably should have said next week, but get it back as soon as you can. Any questions? Next session.
Are we still having sponsors for?
Yes. And at the next session, I'm going to give the paperwork to go choose a sponsor. I'm a little late at this because we're only doing this once a month, so I probably should have done that this week too, but I think it was too much to handle this week. But you will all have to choose a sponsor, someone who becomes like your mentor as you're continuing on your journey of faith. So think of in that mind that you're going to have to choose a sponsor, not just choose someone because whatever silly reason you might come up with, someone that's a good witness to the faith for you. That's a good sponsor. Okay? The next session we meet is the first Sunday of December 6th. Normally we wouldn't be able to do that because that's the Christmas parade, but I think it's virtual this year, so it's not happening on that day. I know. Well, but everyone was, I can't go because I got to go to the Christmas parade. I said, fine. No Christmas parade this year. All right. Anything else, Mr. Gallo?
Now, just make sure you're doing those journals, because that's a real big part of, since we're only meeting once a month, and if you guys need help doing it online, you can do it in paper. I have a couple paper copies up there. If you want to just do that before you leave, take 2 minutes before you leave.
Yeah. If you want to, I'm giving you, it's 2 minutes before you leave. If you wanted to do it and fill it out here and leave it here. But what Max had said, some of you might not know how or need a review on how to do it online. So Jonathan will give you a very quick review if anyone wants to do it that way. If you don't, that's fine. But we need to get those every week, and I'm not getting them from everybody every week. Okay, so you either do it online, or you download it, and you print it out, and you take a picture of it with your phone and mail it to Jonathan, or you can do a hard copy here.
Yeah, and I got a whole packet upstairs too, if you want to take hard copies for the week. If you want to just do that too, let me know.
Okay, so that being said, Jonathan's going to be over here to show anyone who might want to review how to do it online. The mentors who are here are looking at those, maybe putting comments now and then. I'm looking at them, I'm putting comments now and then. So we are reviewing them. So I know who's doing them and who's not doing them. So please do them, okay?
Yep, and if you want a hard copy, it's on that table over there in the middle. I can get some pens for it.
There's copies of today's, so if you want to leave here and not have one other thing to do, so you can go home and watch the game, that could be pitiful, but Patriots are playing at 1:15, Bushy?
They're playing right now.
No, 1:15. Doesn't start till 1:15, does it?
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock? Okay, based on that, let's get out of here. Bye.